Hello and welcome. The experts at My Tax Accountant have put this guide together to really get to grips with a topic that, let's be honest, can give any business owner a few sleepless nights: an HMRC inquiry. Our goal here is simple: to swap that feeling of anxiety for a clear, confident plan and turn all that complexity into clarity.
All right, let's just jump straight in with a question. What's the one piece of mail that can land on your doormat and make your heart drop, no matter how fantastic your business is doing?
You guessed it, the classic brown envelope from HMRC, a notice of enquiry. For absolutely anyone running a business, whether you're a freelance creative in Shoreditch or a building contractor up in Manchester, this single letter can kickstart some serious stress. But you know what? It really doesn't have to. So here's our game plan to turn that worry into confidence. We're going to look at HMRC's incredible detection system, break down what that enquiry letter actually means, walk through your response playbook, touch on the really serious fraud cases, and then talk about how to keep penalties to a minimum. Let's get into it. First on the list, HMRC's all-seeing eye. There's this old myth that tax inquiries are just random spot checks. The reality, especially as we head into 2026, is that they are incredibly targeted, all thanks to some seriously powerful data analytics. It's not like a lottery anymore. It's a very calculated, data-driven move. And the powerhouse behind all of this is a system they call Connect. The best way to think of it is like a master digital detective, and it's working around the clock. It's this massive data matching tool that pulls together information from countless places to build a really detailed picture of every single taxpayer's financial life here in the UK. And its only job? To spot things that don't add up. And the sheer scale of this is, well, it's pretty mind-boggling. Connect crunches its way through over 22 billion lines of data. It's this huge digital web, and it's designed to catch any single thread that looks even slightly out of place, linking the income you declare to your actual financial footprint in the real world. So where on earth is all this data coming from? Well, as you can see, pretty much everywhere. Connect is pulling info from all UK banks, plus financial institutions in over 60 other countries. It's scanning the land registry and the DVLA to see what properties and cars you own. And of course, in this digital age, it gets direct feeds from platforms like Amazon, eBay, and Airbnb. This is exactly how HMRC does what it calls lifestyle consistency checks. For example, if your 2025-26 tax return says you earn £40,000, but the land registry shows you just bought a £700,000 flat in London with no mortgage, Connect is going to flag that in a heartbeat. And here's a quick did you know that is so important for anyone in the gig economy. That bit of extra cash you're making from renting out your spare room on Airbnb or maybe selling things on Etsy, it is not flying under the radar. These platforms are feeding data straight to HMRC, which makes undeclared income one of the easiest things for Connect to find. Okay, so the letter's arrived. The very first thing to do is take a breath, stay calm, and figure out what exactly HMRC is asking you. Just understanding the type of inquiry is your first real step to taking back control. Let's break down the main ones you might come across. Now, most routine inquiries fit into one of two boxes. First, you've got an aspect inquiry. This is the less scary of the two. It's a very targeted question about one specific part of your tax return, maybe some unusually high expenses or a big R&D claim. On the other hand, you have a full inquiry, which is much, much broader. This is where HMRC wants to go through your entire tax return and all your business accounts with a fine-tooth comb. And the really crucial thing to remember is that even a simple aspect inquiry can blow up into a full one if you don't handle it just right from the get-go. Now let's look at the next step up the ladder. If you get a Code of Practice 8 notice, or COP 8, things are getting serious. This is a civil investigation that's handled by HMRC's Elite Fraud Investigation Service. They use it when they suspect a big tax loss, usually from things like complex tax avoidance schemes or offshore accounts. It's not a criminal investigation to start with, but it's a huge red flag that HMRC thinks you've been deliberately bending the rules. And then, right at the top of the scale, you have Code of Practice 9. A COP 9 letter is, without a doubt, the most serious piece of mail you can get from HMRC. It means they suspect you of actual tax fraud. It always comes with an offer, something called the Contractual Disclosure Facility, or CDF. And this is basically a deal. You come clean and fully disclose everything, and in return, HMRC agrees not to pursue a criminal prosecution. The stakes couldn't be higher. But that's not all. Here's where so many people make a mistake. What you do in those first 30 days is absolutely critical. It sets the tone for the entire investigation and can massively change the final outcome.
So let's open up the playbook.
So, what do? Okay, step 1, do not panic. Read the notice really carefully to make sure it's a valid inquiry and to understand what it's about. Step 2, and honestly, this one is non-negotiable, get a tax investigation specialist involved right away. Step 3, all communication with HMRC needs to be managed super carefully, ideally by that specialist. And step 4, you need to understand that you have rights. You have safeguards that protect you from them going too far.
This bit of advice really hits the nail on the head. Never, ever go to a meeting with HMRC by yourself. I know it might seem like you're being cooperative, but these inspectors are highly trained interviewers. It's so easy to accidentally say something that makes the whole investigation wider, or just makes things a lot worse. Having professional representation isn't a luxury, it's an absolute must. It's also so important to know your rights. HMRC's powers are wide for sure, but they are not unlimited. They can only ask for information that is reasonably required to check your tax position. This is a legal protection to stop them from going on what are called fishing expeditions, just demanding years and years of records to see if they can stumble upon something. A good advisor can and will push back on requests that are irrelevant or outside the scope of what's being investigated.
Okay, let's go a bit deeper into those most serious cases. When HMRC suspects fraud and sends that COP9 notice, you are genuinely facing a life-changing decision. Understanding what's at stake is the very first step in handling this kind of high-pressure situation.
The contractual disclosure facility, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a way to avoid a criminal investigation, which could actually lead to prison time. But on the other hand, to accept it, you have to formally admit to deliberate tax fraud. It's a huge fork in the road, and whichever path you choose has permanent consequences. And you don't get long to think about it. The clock starts ticking the second you get that letter. You have exactly 60 days to either accept the CDF offer and give them an outline of what happened, or to formally reject it. That 60-day window is not flexible, and it creates a huge amount of pressure. This slide really lays out the two different paths. If you accept, you admit fraud, but you're safe from prosecution. You'll still face some hefty civil penalties, for sure, but you avoid a criminal record. If you reject the offer, you're saying you did nothing fraudulent, but HMRC is then totally free to launch a criminal investigation whenever they want, and that rejection letter you signed can be used as evidence against you in court. This is not a decision you should ever make without top-tier legal and tax advice. Right. Now, whether we're talking about a simple aspect inquiry or a really complex COP9 case, if an error is found, there are going to be penalties. But the size of that penalty isn't set in stone. It's hugely influenced by your behavior and how much you cooperate. Let's have a look at how they calculate that final bill. HMRC puts mistakes into 3 categories of behavior. Careless means you just failed to take reasonable care. Like a small business owner in London getting a complex roll wrong. Deliberate means you knew a figure was incorrect, but you submitted it anyway. And deliberate and concealed is the most serious. You knew it was wrong and you actively took steps to hide it, like creating fake invoices. A huge part of the strategy is always to prove that any mistake was, at worst, just careless. This table shows how those behaviors directly link to penalty amounts, which are calculated as a percentage of the tax you owe. And as you can see, the penalties shoot up pretty quickly. A careless mistake that you tell HMRC about before they find it, that's an unprompted disclosure, could end up with a 0% penalty. But a deliberate and concealed error that HMRC has to uncover themselves can lead to a penalty of up to 100% of the tax due. Stay with me, the next point might surprise you. And here is a pro tip. That final penalty percentage isn't just picked out of a hat. You can get it reduced, sometimes significantly, based on the quality of your cooperation. HMRC judges this on 3 things: telling them what happened, helping them to understand it, and giving them access to the information they need to work it all out. Being proactive and cooperating fully is the single most powerful tool you have to reduce those financial penalties. Now, in some situations, a penalty can be wiped out completely if you can prove you had a reasonable excuse for whatever went wrong. But a word of warning, HMRC's definition of reasonable is very, very strict. A sudden, serious illness or the death of a close family member might work, but arguments like, I didn't have the money to pay, the system's too hard, or I just forgot, those will almost certainly be rejected. So what happens if you and HMRC just can't agree on the facts of the case? Well, before you end up in a formal tribunal, there is another option: alternative dispute resolution, or ADR. This basically brings in an independent mediator from inside HMRC to help break the deadlock. It's a really practical, smart way to de-escalate a fight and can often get a resolution way faster and cheaper than a court battle. Okay, we've gone through the tech, the different types of inquiries, the strategies for resolution, and all of this brings us to the most important takeaway of all, your expert next step. So here's the bottom line. We've kind of come full circle, right back to the most crucial piece of advice. Everything we've talked about today, controlling the scope of the inquiry, negotiating penalties, managing all the communication, it all comes down to this one action. Getting a specialist involved isn't an admission of guilt. It is the single most effective strategic move you can make to protect yourself and your business. Now, before we wrap up with the final details, let's just hammer home that one key message again. Do not try to handle this alone. The moment that letter arrives, your very first call should be to an expert. That one single action can completely change the entire course of the inquiry. And just before we finish, it is important for me to say that the information in this guide is for general purpose only, based on the tax landscape in November 2025. It should not be relied upon by itself to make your financial decisions. So, before you make any decision, you absolutely must consult an expert. For a professional, managed response to an HMRC inquiry, or for advice on any other tax issue you might have, get in touch with the experts at My Tax Accountant. You can reach them by phone on 0208 570 8531 or by email at info@mytaxaccountant.co.uk. Thank you for watching.